All right, I want to talk a little bit about the IT Workforce Planning Initiative. Ariel, can you put up the first slide? Back last fall, we kicked off an IT Workforce Initiative, and I've talked about this at the last CIO Forum, that this is something and I've talked about it for the last year, this is something we needed to do, this is what we're going to do. So I told you we're going to do it, I said we're going to do it, and now we're executing against it. So we are out there doing some workforce planning. You know, as we modernize SBA, as we're moving forward, as we're moving to the cloud, you know, Bo talked about cybersecurity threats. We've got cloud, we're moving to cloud, we're trying to innovate, and we're trying to modernize, and we're trying to take very big steps at SBA. Workforce planning, you know, you talk people, process, technology. People, people, people. We're not going to move forward without all of you and without help from everybody to move SBA forward. There are so many factors coming in, again, you know, from the cloud and innovation, having to modernize, what's coming in from OMB. I'm telling you from across the federal government, the next wave that's coming through, I hope all of you have looked at the IT modernization report because we're having to respond on all of that. The next piece that's coming through is about the workforce. We are doing a workforce assessment for all the IT specialists, anybody who's working on IT across SBA. I am doing this in partnership with the Chico, Elias Hernandez. He could not make it today, but this is in partnership with the HR office and really looking across SBA and where we need to go on the workforce and what we're doing. You know, the changing cyber threats, moving to the cloud, artificial intelligence, data is going to be a big deal over the next few years. It's already a big deal, but how do we manage the data? How do we secure the data? How does the data move? Who's using it? Where is it coming in from? Where is it going to? Data is going to be a big deal over the next few years. And I'm looking at Steve in the back, you know, with his community of practice. There's a lot of activity going on in that space. Is our workforce prepared? Are we ready to go? When it comes to moving to the cloud, comes to, you know, more innovative technologies and really leapfrogging forward and moving ahead. The workforce team interviewed the associate administrators last fall before the holidays, talked to all of the associate administrators and said, what are your expectations of the IT workforce? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? So, you know, there's a lot of characteristics that came up through this. And, you know, mobility, modern platforms, operating systems, stability, security, innovation. I mentioned that a minute ago. All of these things are top of mind for the associate administrators, those program leads across SBA. So when you, not only is the work we've done over the last 12, 15 months incredibly important, there's a lot of expectations out there from the associate administrators all the way down through the organization. All the new folks that came in that are technical savvy, a lot of the political appointees, they are on top of this stuff and they're like, okay, when can I have this, when can I have that? And right now we continue, the plane's taking off and we're continuing to throw parts on that plane while it's taking off. So we've got a lot of activity continuing on. But I wanted to put front and center that from the leadership across SBA, some of these things that are up on the screen are the very things that the associate administrators all the way through, they are looking for these kind of things from my office. And in my office, it's not just about my office, but looking at the workforce. There's expectations on the IT workforce across SBA. So this is why we're really looking at where do we need to be in the long run. We can do all the roadmap and planning, but we need the expertise, the staff, and we need people up to speed to be able to support all of these things that are characterized, that are listed up here. Next slide. So the activities to date. So last fall, a number of activities, a number of interviews that happened. The focus groups, there were 8 to 10 focus groups that just wrapped up, and then the ones with the managers this week. But that's just that analysis, talking to staff. Dennis and the team and Shelly, who's here, I see you pop in. They've been talking to people, trying to find out. We've also gotten demographic data from HR, really looking at the workforce, who's eligible to retire. I'll go into that in a minute. But the focus groups, the analysis, we need to understand what we have today so that we know where the gaps are and where we need to be in the long term. I said we've met with the managers, we've met with the supervisor, and I say me, I mean Shelly and the team and continuing there. But there's a lot of, you know, drivers with that workforce and where we need to go in the long run. And do we have the skills? Do we have the capacity? Do we need to put training in place? I already know that you know, through some of the feedback is, you know, training is a big deal. People are out there especially the folks in the field, and others are self-taught. They're training themselves. There's not a lot of funding out there. Well, I need to understand that, and I need to understand where the gaps are, because I talk about moving to the cloud, but if folks out there in the field don't understand SCCM, how we're monitoring and management, and how you're going to attribute to all of this stuff, we need to be positioned to be able to do this. So that's part of the current activities, focus groups, understanding where we are, who we are as a community. I can't say enough that we are an IT community, all the IT specialists across SBA. You may not work directly for me in my office, but you are part of that IT community. And as such, I do have some responsibility to making sure that in the long run that you have the training, you have the skills to help SBA succeed and ultimately help those entrepreneurs and small businesses that are out there. So next slide, please. So some of the demographic data results. So the SBA IT workforce is 217 strong. There are 217 people working on IT programs and projects. There's 150, how many of those are? 176 that are 2210 specifically. So you can see in here where the breakout for the IT workforce organizational representation is. In ODA, there's 99 IT specialists working in the organization. In my office, it says 59. I have some vacancies. I actually have 70 billets in my office at the time of the data collection. We've hired a couple people since then, so I'm up to 62 right now in my office, and we're hiring quickly. But you can see where the breakout is on the graph here. And if you look at the gender representation of the IT workforce, 78% is male, and you've got another 22% is female. When you look at the 2210 workforce only, 16% of the 2210 workforce is female. So there's not many of us around here, not many women in the workforce at SBA. And while this is not too far off from the federal government, it is off. We're off a little bit on this. But we've really dug into the demographics, understanding where people are, what they're doing, how old they, how long they've been a federal employee, how long they've been at SBA. So next slide, please. This goes to years of service at SBA. So on here, you can see the numbers here. So we've got 74 IT folks that have been at SBA for 4 years or less. I know I'm one of them, and about a third of the OCIO shop is less than 4 years because we're all pretty new here. But you also see that there's 3 people that have been at SBA before between 40 and 44 years, so they've been here a very long time. And we've got a good mix in between, but you can still, even in the 15 to 19 years with SBA category, there's 29 people there. When you look at the workforce as a whole, when you look at the grade structure at our career levels and the grades, we've got, of course, some senior executive SESs, but at the GS-13 and above, the journeyman level, GS-12, you can see there's 162. The mid-level, there's 145. And then at the trainee, which is the much more junior grades, there's 4 people in that. So we've done, there's a lot more detail behind this on the demographics. But when you start looking at the years of service, this is great. We've had people with a long history of SBA. Some of these folks have been here for 40 years. They've been there, done that, seen it all, and said, yeah, great, here we go again, something new. So they're continuing to evolve, and technology continues to evolve. Is Andy here? Where's Andy? Andy, what were you reading the other day? Something about coding for dummies or something? How long have you been with SBA? Andy's been here for 29 years at SBA. Andy continues to learn. I'm always impressed. 40 years with the government, 29 years at SBA, and I'm always impressed by Andy, and I talk about him all the time because Andy was sitting there last week at his desk reading JavaScripting for Dummies. And Andy is I hear, a pretty persistent tester, good QA guy. But, Andy's been here a long time. He's one of those folks that have been here a long time. He's got a lot of history at SBA and a lot of knowledge about the programs, about SBA, about technology. So, we like to tap into that. Well, what happened before that? What was the history behind it? And I know, at SBA people have long memories, so I do hear about things and failed projects all the time. But I thought you should at least see a sample of what the demographics and the workforce looks like. Next slide, please. So really, next steps on the workforce, we're going to continue to work on the interviews, collecting the data. Next steps, once we get past the as-is, what is the as-is on our workforce? Really figuring out where do we want to be in the long run, what are those skill sets, what are those competencies that we need for the long run, and really digging into the gap analysis to say what do we need to get from point A to where we are today, where we need to be in the long run. So we have to evaluate the findings that's coming out of the interviews, out of the focus groups, out of the data collection, interviewing the associate administrators and all the rest of the leadership. One of the things that we've talked about is standing up an IT workforce steering group. You know, that would be folks like, you know, Steve Kaczarski, Mike in the back, who's here. Where's Nate? Is Nate here? Nate's in the back, folks like that to say, okay, as we're looking at the findings of where we need to be, you know, these folks, it's not just me, you know, ODA's got a larger portion of the workforce than I do, but where do we need to go in the long run? And looking at building out a steering committee to say, where do we need to go for the enterprise? This is not me saying we're going to do X, it's going to be a collective group, and looking at a steering committee to help drive that. And that's in partnership with the CHICO as well. We're going to continue to evaluate the findings on this, identify the actions. We need the skill across the entire workforce. We've done a lot of work within my office. We've had training. We've had workshops, you know, on cloud, on security, on lunch and learns last summer. We've had a lot of that. But how do I start interacting with the workforce that's outside of my office? I'm only 70 employees. What's going to happen with the other 130, 147 IT folks out there that continue to need training, need to know about evolving technologies in that? So really, what's that going to look like? And what's that strategic workforce plan going to be in the long? You know, I talk about last year, right? Stabilize, modernize. We did a lot of that work. This year, we're really starting in on more of the enterprise assessment, looking at the enterprise. How do we act like an enterprise? How do we do that around technology? But not only am I looking at this year, I'm looking out in the next year and the year after to say, okay, we've got all these things, we're working on this, working on next year to say where do we need to go. This goes into the workforce planning where all the IT specialists across SBA need to be in their skill sets to be able to support where that vision is and what the direction of the front office is. You know, the administrator is very clear about efficiency, effectiveness. What are we putting in the hands of our employees? Guy mentioned virtual counseling earlier. You know, how am I going to get the skills? How am I going to train people? Do you even understand what virtual counseling means? We're working with the Office of Field Operations, Jason, to say, you know, what is virtual counseling? How do we leverage technology? How do we leverage Skype for Business? How do we roll that out so an entrepreneur doesn't have to drive, you know, 5 hours to an office to meet with somebody face-to-face, that we can use Skype or use other technologies to be able to do that? And then how do we roll that into using chatbots? How do we do that in bringing in knowledge bases and bringing in those SMEs, and how can somebody type in a question on a chatbot and get a response back? And how do we do all of those kind of things? So looking forward, and how do we have the skill set that understands that, knows the vision of where we're going, and is able to help execute on that and support it in the long run to be able to do that. Sometimes technology is the easy part, relatively easy part, and the business process is the harder part. And even when you look at virtual counseling, I can turn on Skype for Business all day long, right? So, okay, my folks can do that. But being able to turn that on, the technology piece is relatively easy. But you have to know the business of SBA. You need to know how those customers, how those entrepreneurs and small businesses out there interact with SBA, so that when somebody says, I want a face-to-face visit with somebody online through Skype or whatever that is, that virtual counseling, that we're able to support that, and that the business office is able to support that as well. So not only do we need folks that understand the technical piece of it, those of you that have been around a long time that understand the business of SBA are going to be incredibly critical to helping us move forward as well. But we've got a lot of work to do around the strategic plan and being able to work on this. We want to get out there on the CIO portal, get some information about the workforce, the planning, the communicate. You're going to be sick of me hearing about the workforce piece. You know, there's been a lot of questions about the workforce, why we're doing this, why we need to do it. We cannot move SBA forward. We cannot modernize. We cannot do all of these things until we get everybody up to speed and understand the direction of what we're headed. We try to share information as much as we can through the CIO forums. I'm trying to be smarter about what are other avenues that we can get out there. We put the CIO portal up out there. about 4 or 5 months ago. We've got it up there. We're continuing to post information. Probably in the next few weeks we'll get the projects up there. We're trying to get the information out there, and we're trying to share the information. As we continue the workforce, we're taking your feedback, but that feedback is incredibly important to me as well as the Chico in understanding where we need to go in the long run. So again, we're going to put some information up on the CIO portal, have a landing page, get the information out there. We're going to post the case for change, the workforce demographics, a lot more detail than what you have out there. There's some frequently asked questions that are coming up in the focus groups, I understand, from Shelley and Dennis, that we're going to post up there with some responses on that. So with that, I really want to get in front of this workforce thing because I understand, and I'm going to be very frank and upfront about it, I understand people are like, oh, what's going to happen to my job? People are asking questions about it. That's not what it's about. It's about moving the business of SBA forward. It's not about moving your job, changing your job. Yeah, people are going to need training. There's going to be skill sets that we need for the long run. We need to do all of those things. But I also understand when people's cheese gets moved, people are uncomfortable because we are doing new things. We are pushing out new technologies, and we are kicking the tires on a lot of things. And I want everybody to be partners in that across SBA. And I know while I was out in Denver, Nate, I met with your folks out there. We spent a good hour or so with the folks out in Denver, meeting with some of the folks at some of the other field offices, and even when folks come in here, we've met some of the folks from Buffalo, from ODA, the service center, and some of the other areas. So really good interactions, but we need to keep the pipeline open. We need to really look at this workforce, the workforce plan, where we need to go in the long run, taking the as-is to where we need to go, analyzing gaps, and really helping all of SBA and the IT community move forward. So with that, I want to open it up for questions. Okay, I'm going to keep talking. A couple other things that came out of the focus groups that, was, floated to me is, not only is it about the need for training, that folks are doing a lot of extra hours and things like that, working extra hours on their own, not on their own, but working overtime, comp time, and things like that. I need to understand those kind of things because if we have an imbalance on our workforce, if we don't have enough 2210s, if we need more 2210s, what does that look like? So that's part of the data gathering we're trying to understand. And I keep harping on the training because I'm taking to heart some of the feedback that's come back in. While I've not been fully, briefed back on some of the outcomes from the focus groups and the managers meetings, the training is a big deal for folks out there, and that people are doing training on their own. They're doing as much as they can on OJT and online and what they can, but I really think we need to take it level. And I also understand that some managers are not supportive of paying for training for the IT specialists, especially folks that it might be out there by themselves or in small groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, in really moving this forward. Do we have questions on the phone? Okay.
Force assessment result in reorganizations or realignment of the SBA IT staff?
As we're looking at the IT workforce, there's no plans in place to move people around or to do anything like that. We need to understand what that workforce is, what people are doing. Many and most of the folks out there, the IT specialists, are supporting mission programs. That work needs to continue. That's very important work, whether you're an administrator or you're a programmer or any of those things. So, we're not looking at realigning, making big wholesale changes, anything like that in the workforce. This is all about getting our arms around the workforce, understanding the skill set, making sure we're putting the tools in your hands so that you can be more effective in your job as we move forward. What's a 2210? If you don't know what a 2210 is and you're on the call, that's the federal government number for, general number for IT specialist. So 2210 is an IT specialist in the federal government, and within that 2210, there's about 10 parentheticals that are subcategories within the IT, within the 22 category, from system development through PM through cybersecurity. Are there any questions on the phone?
And at this time, we are not showing any questions through our phone lines.
Okay. I will say before we conclude, my door is open. I am very open. Ask anybody here. I sit in an open cube just like everybody else. I am very open to questions, conversations. If you guys have concerns, feel free to reach out to me. Door's open. So I want to be as very open, as transparent as possible about the workforce, the assessment, the direction we're headed, and how we're moving forward. So more to follow. Thank you.